I just got an email from Gay Sex, and the preview assures me, quote, "This is not a virus." So I'm gonna open the shit out of that one.
Hell yeah, make sure and forward it to me.
Speaking of gays, I will forward it to you. That's my segue.
Yeah.
No, speaking of gays, man, remember that cool third Twilight movie?
Oh yeah.
It was super cool,
That
right?
was a good one.
Woo! Twilight sucks. Surprisingly, though, the guy that directed that is responsible for a super not gay vampire
I didn't
movie,
know that.
and that's 30 Days of Night. And we're talking about that bad bitch right now. Story's pretty simple. Some vamps encroach upon Barrow, Alaska, a town that is sunken into 30 Days of Night, hence the title. Vampire mayhem ensues as people try to survive.
It's not a thinking man's movie.
It's not. It's a blunt instrument, if anything.
Yep.
But so was a comic book it was based on.
Yeah.
Very direct, very visual.
You could literally read it in like 10 minutes.
10 minutes if you're like not reading,
Yeah.
because there's really no need to read.
There's
It's
no
a very visual
Yeah,
comic.
it's pretty much visuals.
Lots of imagery, lots of weird paintings, you know, but very cool comic, I gotta say, from Steve Niles. And Steve Niles himself was responsible for one of the drafts of this particular adaptation that came out, like 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, Stevie N, I call him.
Yeah, old Stevie. He says, yeah, might as well work on this piece.
Yep.
No, man, it's actually pretty good that he was involved because it shows, I think, anyway. I don't know if I know you read the comic or saw the comic, I guess.
Yeah. I looked at it.
But yeah, it's good, man, because a lot of his influence is very clearly on the screen. And it's evident that the filmmaker went out of his way to bring some of that visual pizzazz to the screen, even though obviously they couldn't bring it exactly as it was, because literally one of the ugliest comics ever, on purpose,
Yeah,
mind
it's
you.
kind of like people don't even look human.
Yeah, normal people don't even look
Yeah.
human. So, but yeah, anyway, 30 Days of Night came out about, give or take, a decade ago. I went and saw this in the theater, and I remember being the only one that liked it of the group that I went with. So I'm kind of interested to see what you think about it. I know you've seen this before, right?
Yeah.
So,
Saw it before I saw the book.
Okay.
Looked
saw
at it.
the book. Yeah, we got to stress, this book really does very little
It
dialogue.
was like one piece of dialogue, and there's a vamp.
That's a vampire, I guess.
Yeah.
End of script. But anyway, well, what'd you think this second go round? I guess
I liked it.
that non-committal. I liked it. Is can be read either well or incredibly bad.
Yeah,
We'll see.
It's my patented. I liked it.
As this progresses. Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of this movie. I really enjoy it. And we're going to talk about why as we break down the pros and the cons of this flick. As aforementioned, my first con is David Slade also directed Twilight 3. What?
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't even know what he directed after that, because after that I kind of just gave up. I was like, oh man, Twilight.
Team Edward.
Yeah, he was definitely Team Edward.
Yeah.
No, but all jokes aside, bad
bounce
jokes
with us.
aside, my first pro for this movie is the visual approach they took to it. It's a very monochromatic looking movie, and if you know what happened to achieve this effect, it's all the more impressive because they weren't anywhere in the Arctic, although he wanted to shoot somewhere where those temperatures were, you know, sub-zero.
That's probably a good idea, right?
They replicated all this in New Zealand and in backlots. So that a lot of the town shots are just actually like a backlot, which is pretty impressive because it always looks very natural.
Big lots.
On top of that, we have this, expansive, barren wasteland surrounding it, which also looks pretty damn good. So yeah, and then again, the monochromatic look lends to the flavor of the comic coming to the screen visually, on top of other things. So that's a big pro for me. The look of it not only looks good and gives it its own particular taste, but adds to its unique approach. Give me one of your pros there, champ. I like how I turned into like fucking, I don't know, who talks like that? Nobody?
That's horrible. That fat guy, he was pretty rad.
The fat guy, yeah. If you're familiar with Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, also Batman Begins.
And yeah, that's true. Yeah, man, just in general, the cast, I think, is really good.
Yeah.
A really good cast, man. This is one of my favorite. I mean, granted, the guy's not a big name, but Josh Hartnett is kind of like an underused talent.
Mm.
And many times people have tried to put him out there, in leads and stuff like that. He's just never hit big, which is unfortunate.
I don't even know who that is.
But here he plays the lead, and I think he's pretty good, man. Not only bringing kind of like this, I don't know, very upright type of character to the screen, but it's somebody that you could actually stand behind and be like, all right, that's a cool cat.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy.
So yeah, but overall the cast is fantastic, and yes, of course, we have a particular member of the cast that is not only the rough and gruff type, and fat apparently is your one criteria that you love, but he gets to use, most importantly, a massive trencher, aka a tractor with a fucking chainsaw on it.
With chainsaw, which we usually see because we live in an area where those are used commonly to kill vampires.
Oh yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see it in action.
Yeah, man.
Doing what it's meant to be doing.
What it was constructed for. Which brings me to my other pro, man. The effects in this are pretty awesome. And they're surprisingly used sparingly.
Yeah. Because
the movie spends a lot of time setting down its character and its characters and locations, and drumming up, a feeling of tension and anticipation. So they come in like spurts, and then eventually they adequately start a spurting blood all over the place towards the last part of the film. But the effects throughout are pretty damn good, man. Surprisingly good, actually. So that's a big pro for me. I know we probably got tickled by that too.
Yeah, took him
in the nethers.
My pick.
The old
ice pick.
Yeah. Well, give me another one of your old little pros there.
I think it just has an atmosphere that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Literally at times. Get it?
Yep.
Because snow.
Yep, it was lame, so I was hoping to ignore it.
No, I just like the atmosphere of the movie. It's pretty cool. It has that kind of, obviously they're alone in the in the freaking Arctic, so they did a good job of making it feel alone, even though apparently it was just in New Zealand.
I refer to this as kind of like a John Carpenter movie that he never got to make.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, I mean, if you really want to be blunt about it, it's kind of like a patchwork of The Thing in terms of its location, and even some of the scenes are kind of reminiscent of it.
There's dogs.
And vampires, which are both John Carpenter movies. Ironically, vampires set in the desert, the exact opposite of this. But yeah, man, so imagine more of the atmosphere and seriousness of the thing and the location, and then slap in some nasty, dirty vampires that just want to eat, and a group of people fending them off. Pretty much that. And it's got that pacing, and it's got like this weird thrumming.
It's a very slow
soundtrack.
It's a very slow movie.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool in that respect. I agree with you on that. Another thing for me are some of the shots and the lighting in this are pretty fucking awesome. Very evocative of the material it comes from, and yet distinctly their own. It created a palette that was its own. It's a movie that looks like its own thing, and yet at the same time owes a lot to its source material. So it was pretty cool. Some of them are downright beautiful, or just just awesomely shot. So that's a big plus for me. You got anything else you want to come there with the pros there, champion? I'm just gonna call you champion.
Yeah, champion.
On account of you look like a champ from Lake Champlain, size like.
Actually, a lot bigger, but no, I mean you pretty much hit all the pros for me.
I think another pro for me is the final act.
Yeah.
It's one of those that's it's one of those where it's a satisfying as fuck final act.
Yeah, because it kind of builds up. The whole movie's just kind of building up to something.
And it delivers.
Yeah.
So it's pretty badass. And again, there's shots in that are straight out of the comic, which if you're familiar with that, it's pretty cool. Punching guy's head, for example.
Yeah, as far as I remember, it was pretty close to the comic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously they had to string it out a little because that comic is 3 pages long.
Yeah.
But
I think my final pro is gonna be that and this might be a negative for a lot of people, And maybe this is why some of the people I watched it with were kind of like
hating.
They weren't hating, but they were kind of like, I mean, it was good, but I didn't feel this. And it has a very comic book style approach to the narrative, in the sense that it doesn't have a clear through line. Sometimes you're just all of a sudden here and all of a sudden there, and that might turn off some people. I know it's turned me off in other movies, but here it kind of works. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's because I was familiar with the comic book. I don't know what it is, but here it works for me. You know, so that might be a negative to some people. For me, I kind of like it. It just gave it more of its distinct feeling, and also added to that kind of feeling of, I don't know, like disjointedness that the film kind of has at times. But yeah, you know, that's a personal little pick there. But let's talk about any cons that you might have experienced during this little number. Give it to me, champ. Apparently,
yeah, champ. Well, the only con that I was thinking of while we were watching was actually kind of just rectified at the end. Mm-hmm. So I can't even.
Well, give it to me anyway. While you were watching it, you thought maybe this.
While I was watching, especially during like the first and second half, I was kind of like, they're cutting away from the kills too much, and they're not necessarily cool. They're just kind of jumping on people and eating them. But then they do kind of make up for it at the end. So it ultimately is not really a con. It was just something I kind of noticed.
And it kind of falls into what a horror fan might want to see versus
especially compared to the comic, where it's just like graphic, like every second.
And of course we have the MPAA to contend with, and since the kills are human, the blood was red. You know, so the MPAA is a bitch, is what I'm saying here. That being said, I get you. Don't get me wrong. Yes, I understand and I agree. It's something that kind of works in its favor at times, and I guess against it in other times. In its favor, I say this because the film is methodically paced. It kind of feels like it inadvertently is holding back. And like you say, and ultimately in that third act, when they just let loose, it kind of feels like, oh, wow, that was a payoff. So intentionally or not, they did have to obviously do a lot of cutaways. But it kind of ends up working, like you say. It's just
some of them felt like they were maybe filmed and they cut. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it did seem intentional. So it's not ultimately it's not really a con.
For me, I guess if I had to pick a con, it would be that the second act might suffer from some pacing issues, in the sense that you are basically holed up with people, you know, for quite a while. So if you're not in the mood, it may, you know, hamper you from enjoying the second act a little.
And then there isn't really any, there isn't a lot of intrigue between the people.
Right.
You know, there's no real drama in there, so it does. I could see someone being like, well, there's not really much happening here.
Exactly. So that might be a thing that you have to overcome or don't want to overcome. That might be a negative. For me, it's not, in the sense that as a whole the film is leading somewhere, and it's evident that it is. And I mean, obviously it does. But I can see that being an issue for some people. And maybe that's what those people experienced, that they were like, I didn't kind of feel that little middle there for a second. And the fact that when we do cut to the other end of the spectrum, the vampires doing their thing, that they do these cutaways and stuff like that, that might also contribute to that being a less than spectacular middle. But it's really briefly while they're holed up mainly in one of the houses in the attic sequence. Yeah. It's mainly during that part, but the film does a good job of picking itself out of that pit, if you want to call it that. And moving ahead, so I think it ultimately repairs itself. A slight bump in the road, I think. But you got any other cons that might have popped up?
I kind of wish the final vamp on vamp battle, he didn't get his shit pushed in that much, but it ultimately leads to punching a dude in the face. So
through the face, literally in the face.
Yeah. So it's okay, but I was kind of like, because you get this like build up of him walking towards the dude all cool and shit. You're like, oh hell yeah, we're gonna go see some vamp action, And then he gets his shit pushed in for like freaking 50 hours.
Epically so.
And then he does like a one punch through the face.
Yeah, yeah. So there you have it, folks. That's our pros and cons. Let's get some final thoughts on 30 Days of Night and a final score on the scale of 1 to 10. Give it to me.
I like it. It's not very deep. There's no thinking with this movie really, but I think stylistically it's pretty cool, and it does set a cool tone.
Mm-hmm.
So I dig it. I do want to see how shitty the sequel is, but you never know. Maybe it's good.
It might be good.
Probably not though.
Although they do recast Stella, so that's a
there you go.
That's not cool because I like Melissa George. That's another pro for me, by the way. I want to kiss her weird downturned lips.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
So give me a final rating on that.
I'll give it like an 8. It's pretty good. Obviously, this is not in the Paddington 2 scale.
Nothing can beat Paddington, honestly.
Yeah, but it's pretty fun. I do have one complaint about. I guess this should have been in the cons, but it's not really a con.
Mm-hmm.
That one vampire that keeps doing that face. This one.
I like how you can't do the
I know,
face
I'm doing it.
Covered.
I'm doing it, but you can't see it. He was a little too into it, I think. I was like, dude, chill out with the face.
Oddly enough, though, he is the one vampire that looks almost exactly like his comic book counterpart. So I guess kudos at the same time to him.
You're good. You look like hideous artwork.
Yeah,
I guess that's
congrats,
cool.
guy. You're ugly. Yeah, man, I like this movie quite a damn bit. It is a favorite. I think you're right in the sense that it is not a deep movie, but it does have something to say. See, this is what I mean, and it's relevant to this guy directing Twilight later.
Mm.
Ultimately, 30 Days of Night, despite being a nasty little horror movie, it's kind of a love story at its core, except the vampires are not romanticized at all, which is usually the case in vampire movies, especially since, I don't know, fucking the 60s or 70s. All of a sudden, vampires are sexy as shit.
Yeah.
This one says, fuck those vampires. Here's this couple that's separated, and that's the love story. And that's kind of how it culminates, with kind of a sad tone to their particular love story. It's about a guy that's a good guy. These fuckers separated. This situation came in the middle of them, brought them together, and guess what? Spoiler alert. He sacrificed himself for her. That's kind of sweet. It's kind of like real. It's an undertone almost. But it's kind of like that little extra stroke that kind of gives it a little heart.
It was kind of something they kind of had to add. They kind of had to have in there because otherwise there kind of would be no story arc for them, you know what I mean?
It's a nice little undertone to something that, would otherwise just be kind of a throwaway, nasty little piece of fun.
Yeah.
So that's cool, man. I like that it's not just completely exploitative. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But, so that's cool. I really like that. I really enjoy all the things you said. And I have to ultimately give it a score of, I'm going to give it a little 7.5. It's a very fun movie, man. I enjoy it quite a bit. Check it out. Tell us what you think about it. Hit like, subscribe, and those notification buttons because we're up.